We are live. Okay, welcome everyone. This is the week 3 office hour Hangout on air. And this week we have a guest, the lead developer from the MIT App Inventor team, Evan Patton, who you see here. And he's going to tell us about some of the new features coming in App Inventor in the future, as well as maybe answer some questions if you have questions about App Inventor that you want to ask him. So Owen, I think I can give a brief bio and let him fill it in. He has his PhD from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute up in New York State in 2016. I think you went there for your undergraduate work as well, right?
Triple degrees, BS, and PhD. They love me.
And has been with the App Inventor team since finishing your PhD. Is that right?
Officially, yes. While I was doing my PhD, I was living in the Boston area, and I originally got sort of involved with App Inventor through a research project called Punya, which was started at MIT, and it was a version of App Inventor designed to integrate better with semantic web technologies to be able to leverage data on the web to quickly bootstrap apps. And the idea there was to help build applications around humanitarian needs. So trying to link together different databases. We went to the International Committee of the Red Cross and did workshops with them on building apps and things like that. And so that was really my first kind of foray into the App Inventor world.
I remember that project. I think it was just starting up when I was visiting there in 2012, 2013.
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, that time frame. So,
well, Owen, welcome. This is the Mobile Computing with App Inventor course. Next week, our guest is going to be Karen Lang, who will be able to answer questions about the MIT Master Trainer Program. So quite a few students or participants in the course are, I think, planning to look at that as a follow-up to the course. But we'll keep, we'll hopefully just tonight focus on App Inventor itself and some of the language and other features that you're adding to it. So why don't you go ahead and tell us whatever you want to tell us?
Sure. So I'm going to give a couple demos, similar to ones that I gave a couple weeks ago for the mobile CSP group. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So the first feature that I want to show off here is real-time collaboration for App Inventor. We've over the years gotten a lot of requests from teachers who are looking to do group work or from students working on a collaborative project together. And there have been a number of ways of addressing collaborating in App Inventor over the years, including sharing accounts. So you have one account that controls the project, and then people log in at different times in order to work on it. There's also a tool called the App Merger tool, which allows you to develop on different screens and then merge them into a single project at the end. So some people have had success with using that for collaborative building because each person works on a different part of the app and then they merge together at the end. But this is intended to be Google Docs-like collaboration for App Inventor. And so I have two windows open here. One is Chrome, one is Firefox. And I'm logged in as two different users. I'm Test on the left and I'm Alice on the right. And they're in this shared project. And the shared project is just like a regular App Inventor project. You'll see we have this little person icon here to indicate that the project is shared. And you can share a project through this share project interface. which we're still building out, but the central functionality is there. So I've shared this project, and you can pull in different components just like an App Inventor. So I can pull in another button here, and you'll see on my right-hand side that button has appeared. And both my users right now are yellow, which is a bit unfortunate, but that's all right. And so you can see this yellow highlight here indicates that the other user in the project has selected that button. And then, of course, this user can select this button, and now that button is highlighted in yellow. And of course, you can modify any of the properties. And so I can say I want the font size to be 28, and then both screens update to reflect changes in the properties. Now, the other thing is the blocks editor, of course, and how does this work with the blocks editor? And it has similar functionality. So if I go over and I pull in this click, you'll see it's got this light yellow highlight. I'll just log out and log back in. What will happen? Will I get the same color? I will. Oh well. But you can see when this user moves things around, they are reflected in the blocks workspace, and you can say set the button text, and then this user could come in and just scroll the workspace a little bit. And so, all of the functionality that you expect in App Inventor, is mirrored across the projects or the browsers, which is really great. So we are actually running a workshop right now for 6 weeks, I believe, in Malden High School. And we're actually trying this out with a couple classes to understand how students learn with it, to identify problem spots, because when we release this to the general public, we want to make sure that it's as smooth and as stable as possible. But we really think that it's going to open up a new chapter in terms of App Inventor development by allowing larger groups of individuals to work together on a project and collaborate in new ways. So we're really looking forward to that. Now, the second thing that I was going to demo today.
Evan?
Yes.
If you have any questions before you move on, it looks like a finished product almost. Is it fairly close to being completely implemented?
So the functionality is pretty much there. Our biggest concern right now is in terms of the scalability. Mm-hmm. We've used it in small groups up until this point. This test at Malden uses a much larger classroom. So we're looking at, I think, about 60 students working on it all at once. And then potentially
60 students sharing a single project?
Well, not a single project. This is, I think they're in pairs. We have had up to 10 students working on a single project at once. And I think that's as many colors as we support at the moment. So, but when we've done tests at MIT, we have all of the undergraduate researchers come in, and we all sit down in a room together, and we just have everybody connected to a single project, which is pretty chaotic, having 10 people working on the same set of blocks at once, but it's good fun.
Well, I know this is going to be a really popular feature with teachers. And
there are some things we want to do too in regards to kind of like situational awareness and stuff like that. So like one question I've had in the past is, how do I know where Alice is within the workspace? And so being able to do something like click on the icon here and go to wherever they are in the project. When you're on a single screen, obviously there's not much exploration that happen, but typically as soon as we hand this to students, everyone starts making their own screens and going off and doing all sorts of various things. So it's useful to kind of keep track of where everybody is. And then the other thing that we've been talking about implementing, and has come up a couple times, is sort of a revision history feature like you have in Google Docs, where you can actually kind of step backwards in time. And so that's something that hasn't been implemented yet, but we're leaning towards trying to implement because it can be useful for kind of tracking how people make changes over time. And also, maybe useful for teachers when they're reviewing a project and trying to understand who contributed what to that project.
So let me invite our participants to raise questions or make comments if they wish. Just chime in.
Will these be by audio, or should I open up the window with the chat?
I got the chat. I don't see anything in there. I can field those for you.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that way if people want to see things,
yeah.
I can demo.
Yeah, so I mean, are there any features of the platform that don't work with the sharing, or does everything work?
Well, the sharing is restricted to within a project, right? So all of the functionality of the designer and all the functionality of the blocks editor is set up to work with this. And that includes things like we've tested loading of extensions, having multiple companions. So I can have a companion connected to each of the instances. So each student can have their own view of that and interact with it. We have, if you upload a picture or something like that, then you'll see that reflected as well. So everybody gets the message that there are new assets or assets have changed. And then, functionality, cut, copy, paste, duplication, all that stuff all shows up. So I think if I just come in here and I just collapse blocks, expand the blocks. So that'll have some interesting challenges for people as well when you start futzing with the workspace and it reflects that on everybody's screen. But open some new interesting opportunities for UI UX in the context of that.
Nice. Does anyone have any questions about that feature?
Actually, I have something else to show. I mean, if there are questions, there are questions, but this is something that's really cool that I sometimes forget to show people, but it's really neat to see. So I switched my user on the right-hand side into Spanish. And so now I can see on my screen on the left here, the project view is in English, and screen on the right it's in Spanish, and I can pull in, botón tres. Actually, it shows as one because we don't handle the translations for it, but that's okay, it works. And then so now, and also if I come into the blocks, all of my blocks here are in Spanish. So you can imagine one student building an app in English and another student being able to modify that app in Spanish because all of the blocks sort of get translated over, which is, I think, a pretty neat feature. And we're kind of looking forward to studying how you might do kind of bilingual type app building in this feature.
That's really nice. So can you go back to the design around both of those?
Yeah.
So if I see, so the new button has the label in Spanish.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
All right, and of course you can, like I said before, I can change this to be, let's see if I can recall some of my Spanish, escuela for school, and of course it will update accordingly. So obviously that's not perfect in the sense of if I write all of my strings in Spanish, they will still continue to be in Spanish in the English version and vice versa. We're not going in and translating the contents of the apps.
Right, yeah. Well, then you'd end up with two different apps if you did that, right?
Yes. But in this case, because the interface is in multiple different languages, you can actually experience, the development of the app within your own native language rather than necessarily having to use it.
Right. Very nice. Well, that's certain. When do you think that feature will roll out?
Well, part of it is we're looking to see how this testing goes in Malden. If it goes really well, we are planning to try to see if we can scale it over the summer. We may end up, rather than publishing it on the main service, spin up a second service like we have in the past. Early on, a lot of the IoT stuff originally ran off of its own dedicated system before it was made available publicly to people. So we might end up with like a real-time.app inventor or something like that. And then that way invite people to try it out. Because our biggest concern is that there are kind of these edge cases where projects might get eaten a little bit. We've seen that in the past. Actually, at the Master Trainers training last year, we first demoed this functionality for people. And we had a situation where one of the projects ended up getting wiped off the server because of a bug that we hadn't found. So, we really don't want to push it out until we're absolutely certain that it's not going to cause problems for people. But we will invite the community to try it out and give us feedback and help us identify any problems, with the goal of trying to make it a really great feature for the whole community.
Yeah, and you could always move if you need to go back into the main release. You could always just save your project and upload it, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, and of course, our goal is that if you haven't shared a project, it kind of is just the default App Inventor experience. So if I start, a new project, it's just like normal App Inventor, and you'll note that this project, because it's not shared, doesn't have the little icon next to it. But of course, if you ever need to, then you can go ahead and share it. And then the other thing which I probably should have mentioned when I was showing the sharing screen, right now we don't have a share by link, but that is another oft requested feature, so that you can distribute a link to a project and see it in sort of a read-only mode, which would be useful, for example, on the forum if you need to share a project and say, hey, I don't quite understand why my project isn't working. People can come in and give you advice and things like that. So, which isn't possible today with the way App Inventor is set up.
It's very nice. I'm sure our teachers are going to love it, and students. I don't see any questions in the forum, and I don't see anyone raising their hand or unmuting their mic. So why don't you continue on, Evan?
Sure. So the second oft requested feature for App Inventor has been iOS. And so some of you are aware, we ran a crowdfunding campaign towards the end of last year to help source some funding to support our iOS development. And so today I'm going to give you a little sneak preview of kind of where we are on that. So I'm going to pop into my simulator. So this is the iOS simulator that is bundled as part of Apple's developer kit for iOS. As you can see, it's running a copy of App Inventor. And this is essentially our iOS companion. You'll see it looks a lot like the Android companion, which is intentional. And I can connect this up to my projects. Let me go back to Foo. Okay, companion. And since I'm running on my computer, I have to type in the code. I can't scan it, but the barcode scanner is implemented. All right, and so now I have my project in Foo running on the App Inventor companion. And the intent here is for it to try to behave as much as possible like the Android version of App Inventor. So you'll have a single interface for using App Inventor, the website. I mean, I'm using our real-time version here just to not have to run multiple copies of the server, but it's essentially the same code. And so, as you can see, I have my buttons reflected here, and of course, I've got, if I go back to the blocks, which I can do in this guy.
So is it the one on the left that's paired with the device, or the one on the right? Or
so the one on the left is paired with the device. But of course, it's the same project, right? So because I'm in the real-time editor, both users can actually make changes. So if I actually want to go back here, this is Hola. If I go back, my UI is updated to say Hola. And similarly, if I go to the blocks here, actually, I'm just going to put this back into English for my own sanity. Makes giving the demo a little easier. All right, and so now we have one button, one dot click. Set the button one text to Hello Alice. So if I click that, it says Hello Alice, and then of course I can come in here. Say, Hello Bob. or maybe not. Maybe I can't do that. All right, that's a bug. That's fine. This is why we test things. But yeah, actually, if I go, let me just do this. I might just need to refresh. Okay, now it says hello, Bob. Actually, that's a bug in the real-time system, I think. When changes are propagated from one user to another, it doesn't automatically update the companion for them. They have to make a change, and we're going to fix that in a future.
Oh, I see.
But anyway. And the other thing is we're trying to make it so that the default settings for an app sort of reflect the environment that it's running in. So some of you are aware, in December, we did this really big release of App Inventor, one of the largest to date in terms of the amount and scope of the changes. And that introduced a number of new functionality like maps. It introduced CloudDB, and it introduced being able to use the newer Android themes such as Material UI. And so with the iOS version, what we're trying to do is when you sort of have the default settings for components, that will be reflected by kind of the iOS default. So if you kind of keep everything default, your app will sort of look as close as it can to an iOS app without you needing to kind of fiddle any properties. But then when you run it on Android, it will look like Android. So, and we're trying very hard to make that as seamless as possible. And so you'll note that all the buttons here, even though in the editor, they kind of still have the Android theme because we haven't updated the editor to reflect iOS support. On iOS, they actually are reflecting the iOS theme. And of course, I can come in here and say, you know, I want the text color to be magenta, and then it will update and it will be magenta, right? So
is it possible to open up an Android emulator at the same time?
Sure, why not? Let me I don't have a new emulator on this machine, but I'm going to boot a different one. So just give me a moment. But yeah, we can actually run two here. So
here you have two students, one using an iPhone, and one using a Android device working on the same project.
Yeah. Right, and so yeah, and the idea is that in a mixed device classroom, so some students come in and they have iOS devices, you know, maybe an iPhone or an iPad or something like that, and then another student comes in and he's got a, you know, Samsung S4 or 5 or whatever. You should be able to have those students work together on the same project, regardless of whether it's an iPhone or an Android device. Oh, come on.
You know, this will be really great because for our course for high school students, it means we won't have to buy, teachers won't have to buy tablets or devices. The students can bring their own devices in. Bring your own device.
Yes. All right, let me see here. This one is connected to the iPhone, so I'm just gonna. Oh, it's running. Maybe I jumped the gun on that. Go. Companion. All right, and so yeah, so now I've got my Android emulator and my iOS emulator, and I'm just gonna pull these both over here. I'm gonna, just so they look a little bit similar, I'm gonna switch the theme into device default. All right, and this guy gotta do a change. Will that trigger it? No, it won't trigger it. Okay. We'll just call it screen 2 temporarily. Wait, who's connected to? All right, I've forgotten now because we have so many windows open. Oh my. All right.
I think you had the one on the right connected to the iOS, I thought.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gotten ourselves in a pickle because I wasn't keeping track of who was who. But okay, that's all right. But yeah, so the idea, of course, here is that, yes, you can have both devices. Although, why is this guy? No, I think this guy is the one who's connected to the emulator, but for some reason it's not quite updating. but that's all right. But you get the idea, right? So we have these the buttons, and they sort of reflect the. And if I go and I hello Bob, and I hear hello Bob, and then all's good. But yeah, this is how it'll end up working. And so the idea is that, yeah, you don't have to worry about anymore whether you have a classroom full of Android devices or not ready for you. Really our hope, and we've run so many workshops at MIT and elsewhere where people come in and then, they build an app and they immediately want to say, well, now I want to run it on my iPhone. And of course, you can't do that today with App Inventor, but we really want to make sure that in the future that will be an opportunity for people to be able to do that. And it will.
I know one question that's come up is there's quite a big difference between the Android development environment and iOS. That Android is fairly open, which has made it easy for students and to develop apps and push them out to the Play Store. Will there be a similar capability within the iOS platform?
Well, I mean, that's something we're exploring. I believe there is a mode today in Xcode that allows you to build apps that have a temporary certificate that's valid for up to a week, if I recall correctly. But I'll have to double check that. Without paying the $99 a year developer license that Apple requires in order to be able to install an app on the phone. So one of our goals is that we're hoping that we can leverage that as part of App Inventor so that you could, I mean, granted, 7 days isn't a really long time to have an app available to you, but enough that, if a student builds an app in a workshop or in class, they could take it home and show it to their parents or their friends.
Do you happen to know if the $99 is something, for example, a teacher could purchase and then allow her students to, use that account to put the app on their devices, or is it?
Yeah, that certainly could be a possibility. And there's two different modes of that. So you can either sign up as an individual, or you can sign up as an organization. So I guess sort of our expectation might be that the schools would sign up to cover, all the students within the school, for example. And that's might be a little bit easier. And there's challenges with certificate management and all that stuff. It's a lot more, but iOS development's a bit more involved than Android development in terms of all of that stuff. And we will try to figure out how to make it as seamless as possible for users to the best of our ability. And our hope is that it shouldn't be too different from kind of managing the Android development piece of this, but there will be some changes that will have to be addressed.
So folks, do you have any questions for Evan about either the iOS development or the shared project development, or any other questions about App Inventor? For those who arrived late, Evan is the lead developer for the App Inventor team. He's the guy building all this stuff that he's showing us. So
one of them. I can't take all credit. There are a lot of other people on our team who are helping out.
People, yeah. Questions? No? Okay, wait. We have a question in the chat. Hi, Evan. Thanks for coming and sharing. I have a question related to the built-in Android emulator. The current one is not so friendly and has less capability in comparison to Genymotion, for instance. Are you planning on improving the emulator in the short term? Omar, are you a Windows person or a Mac person? Oh, I think Omar just dropped out.
Well, I'll answer regardless.
He's back.
This is going on YouTube, right?
Yes, that's right. Omar, are you a Mac person or a Windows person? Well, go ahead, Evan.
Yes, so we do have a new emulator package for Mac. It is based on the newer version of the emulator software that Google provides as part of the Android SDK. Now, the last time the emulator software was updated, it was using a version of Android, which is, I want to say 2.1, maybe 2.2. Android Eclair, I believe, or Foreo. Obviously, that was a long time ago. I think that was originally released in 2009, that particular version of Android. So a little bit behind. But the new version is running a newer version of Android. It runs Android 5.1. Actually, this is the this emulator here is the basis for that emulator image. And so it runs newer version of Android. It's a lot faster, as you can see. Let me just quit it, and it will save its state. It's actually taking a little longer than it usually does. Okay. And then if I come back in here and I boot it again, it comes back up right away. So
your screen sharing went away.
Oh, it went off. Oh, well, hi, everybody. Where is Google Hangouts? There we go. I don't know why that happened. Let me try again. Oh, you know what it was? It was because my since my Mac has dual graphics cards, when I quit the emulator, it kicked from one graphics card to the other, and that must have messed Hangouts up. But that's all right. So you didn't get to see how quickly that comes up, but it comes up a lot faster. There's actually a setting that you can enable in it to do that, which we haven't written documentation about this yet, since it just was released for Mac. But there's this save quick boot state, and if you set it to yes, then when you start your emulator, it comes up pretty much instantly, which is really great. And so we'll have to actually tweak the timings on App Inventor, because as you know, it will wait 20 seconds to wait for the emulator to start, but now if it will start in like 1 or 2 seconds. So you're just kind of twiddling your thumb.
I've put a link in the course to the new emulator for Mac.
Okay.
But I don't know if Omar is a Mac or a Windows person. We don't have the new one available yet for Windows. Is that right?
No, not yet. That is something we're working on. The Mac version is out because there was an issue with the latest version of Mac OS X that prevented the old emulator from working with it. And so we released the Mac version in advance to help those users who weren't able to use the emulator at all because of the bug introduced by the latest version of OS X. So, but we are planning to basically take that same functionality for Mac and move it over to Windows as well, so that everyone is still on the same platform. It's just going to take us a little bit of time to put that together.
So to summarize, because Omar I saw dropped off and has dropped back in, to summarize, the answer to the question about improving the emulator is that the new improved emulator is available for Mac right now. That's the one you see on the left there. And they're working on the Windows version of that right now as well. But that'll be, what, another few weeks, few months?
Yeah. Based on the amount of time it took us to get the Mac one together, my guess is it's probably not too bad, because my expectation is that it will mostly be, now that we've figured out how the whole thing works under the hood, because there are a lot of really esoteric error messages that crop up when you're doing this. Our expectation is we've got a lot better understanding of it, so the Windows one should come fast on the Mac one. And then I'm just going to show people here, if you go to the Mac instructions, you'll see there are two. So version 3.0 is the one we just released, and as far as we're aware, it requires Mac OS 10.10 or higher. But you get all of the new functionality. It's a lot faster. You can simulate location changes. You can use the camera with it, so people can take pictures if you've got a webcam on your computer. You can simulate. It does hardware acceleration for graphics, so performance of the graphics in App Inventor should be a little bit smoother, especially for the students who like to build games as projects. And then, so it's a lot richer feature set than the old emulator.
Yeah.
But for those who have an older version of Mac OS X, because this version doesn't work that far back, we still maintain the older version for the time being. And then at some point we will probably just retire that version. But our goal, like I said, is we're going to hopefully get the Windows one out as well pretty soon, so that way more than 99% of our users are either Mac or Windows. We do have a couple who use Linux, and we will also be preparing a Linux package, but that will be the last one that will be published.
Very good. So other questions for Evan? That question came in through the chat, so I hope Omar, you were able to hear the answer to that. Are there other features, Evan, that you want to tell us about?
So there are a couple of things that we're working on.
Actually, I have a good idea.
Yes.
This course that we're all taking together was created in 2015,
mm-hmm.
and it hasn't changed. It hasn't updated the apps that we build for any of the features that have been added since then. Maybe you could just mention a couple of those so people have a sense. I think, for example, the new Maps feature, we're not using that. I wish we had time to update the course, but we didn't. But maybe you could just highlight some of the features that have come on since 2015, so folks in the Hangout here will know what things are available that we aren't touching on in the course.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so there are probably, I want to say, 3 really kind of major things that we've released over the past couple years that are, potentially very interesting to people. So the first, as Ralph mentioned, was Maps. I guess it wasn't the first, but probably one of the larger ones was Maps. And Maps allows you to pull in. Maps isn't implemented on iOS yet, so that's gonna not be happy, but that's all right. So, actually, let me back this guy out.
Yeah, it was very fast.
All right, something's going a little wrong there. I might have a thing I have to clean up, but that's okay. Let's see. Might also be because I have 2 instances going and they're both trying to talk to it. So this is not a normal setup, obviously. You usually don't have multiple students working on a single computer, I don't think.
If you want, you could close one of the instances.
Yeah, I might end up having to do that. But it's neat to see that it all works, I think. So
you're doing some testing while you're.
Yeah, I get the test. All right. Well, it sort of works. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's not having a good time, so I'm just gonna close that for now. Actually, if we do get a little break in here, I want to go grab something in the other room, which I think is pretty cool. But I don't want to
Okay. Go. Why don't you go ahead? I see another question has come in.
Okay. Well, I'll be right back.
2 questions actually. JBK is asking when the iPhone would be supported. I think I've mentioned that we think that will be by the fall. But I'll let Evan confirm that or modify that. when he gets back. Are you still here, Evan?
I'm back. All right.
The question is, when would the iPhone be supported?
Yes, so iPhone support. Great question. Actually, this comes up pretty often. So when we ran the crowdfunding campaign, people who contributed at the $250 level or more are going to be invited at the end of this month to a special beta testing period where they'll get advanced access to the App Inventor version, or the iOS version of App Inventor. The functionality won't be 100%, as you see. There's still a lot of things that we're ironing out, but they'll have the opportunity to try it out and give us feedback. And then our goal is to finish testing and development over the summer, and then release it in August in preparation for the 2018 to 2019 academic school year, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're sort of aiming for kind of a mid-August release on that. Possibly earlier if things go well, so we shall see.
Okay, so Maps is one feature that we haven't baked into the course, and we are using a static map in this week's app. Actually, we have like a walking tour app, but we're using there as a static Google map that we place markers on and to represent landmarks. I bet that app would be a lot more fun to build using this new Maps feature.
Yeah, so the idea of the Maps implementation is it's intended to be very interactive from the point of view of the developer and the user. So, I've dragged in this map component and sort of set it up a little bit with, the fill parent and all of that, just to take up some space. And you can drag in markers into the map. You can drag them around to reposition them. You can change their properties. So I can switch this to be blue, or I can switch it to be magenta. I can change the stroke color as well. Maybe red is not a good. And then if I want to make it kind of fat, you can see now it's this really garish looking marker. You can also customize them with different assets and things like that. Let me see if I can find my there's a faucet here. So you can provide custom images as well. And if they're vector format, it'll actually style them with the same styling that you specify here. But you can also use statically rendered images like PNGs. One of the demos I actually gave this which is pretty funny. So I don't know if all of you must have seen the Hello Per app, obviously. This is Hal's cat. Hal Abelson is our the professor we all work under, and his cat is obviously very famous as being the Hello Per cat. So I did a little demo at one point when we were early on in the Maps development where I put his cat on the map. So it's a little bit of fun, And so, but the idea is that you can customize these in a lot of different ways, and so it becomes a really great way of encouraging your students to build very data-rich applications based on the maps. Because you can think about how you can use intensity of information maybe to change the fill color, because one of the other features that we implemented when we did this was the ability to kind of customize your colors. And so you can do all sorts of, pick a random color and, even make it like partially transparent, and it will, do that for you. So
what sort of blocks come with it?
Oh, a lot. Yeah, this was actually the very first project I started when I came to MIT, and it took me over a year to finish it just because of the depth to which we went with it. So if I kind of pop into the map, there are a lot of kind of event blocks for handling state changes. So if the bounds of the map change, for example, because the user pans the map to a different location, you can do that. You can detect when they single click or double tap at a point. And so people use that, for example, to add new markers to the map, which we'll talk about in a second. It allows you to detect when features on the map are interacted with in a number of ways. So you can click them, you can drag them, you can long click on them, and then you can also manage them when they start and stop dragging. It gives you the ability to load data from a third-party source. So if you, say, have a weather service that gives you back locations of weather stations and you want to render those as markers, you can actually do that. And so you can, the idea is there's a concept called a feature collection. And so people will publish these feature collections online, and you can actually import those right into your app and use them. And I'll show you an example of that in a couple minutes. Then there's error handling and all that stuff as well.
So it looks like with the create marker, you could create a marker that is mapped to your current location, the device's location.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So you can combine this with a location sensor, for example. And in fact, we simplified that for you. There's a show user option here, and I don't have my emulator running, but this actually creates a location sensor under the hood.
Oh, nice.
And then turns it on automatically and uses it to draw the current user's location as they move around. So it's built right into the map component, so it's simplified. There's no logic to write; it just does it for you.
That's great.
And then, so you can create markers, which, like I said, people use that for. We made a tutorial for a project we were working on where students could make a little tour guide app. So basically, kind of what you were explaining before, Ralph. And so, they would add the ability to create new markers. So you could say, okay, I want to record this location in my tour guide, and then you could write a little blurb and take a picture and attach the picture to the marker and all of that. Wow. And so it became a great little way to teach students about, collecting data and, showing that data in different ways.
That's really great.
And then these two here, feature from description, load from URL, basically are the support for reading in those external data sets and then rendering them onto the map. Pan allows you to programmatically move the map to different locations, and then you can also save the contents of the map out to a file, which can then be read back in with the load from URL, so that you can save the state of the map in case the user is interacting with it. Gives you some persistence capabilities. We
really powerful. Yeah. Maybe what about I know about we also aren't using the cloud variables in the course, but I know they're either there or coming soon.
Yeah, so that's CloudDB here, and it works. You don't use anything with Firebase either, correct, Ralph?
Not in this course, but in the next course we do.
All right. Yeah, so Firebase DB and CloudDB are similar in a lot of ways to the TinyWebDB component. They are essentially key value stores, but they all exist in the cloud in different forms. So CloudDB is a solution that we're providing that is 100% open source, because one of our concerns is that the viability of CloudDB Firebase going forward isn't going to be in MIT's favor. And so what we wanted to do is provide essentially our own version of that functionality that anybody is welcome to use. You can also set up your own CloudDB server if you like, so that you can control the data rather than having it go to MIT. Not that we, have any interest in looking at your data, but people are concerned about that in this day and age, and so you're always welcome to run your own service. And so we're hoping that it gives people a lot of flexibility. It allows you to basically have a one-to-many connection or a many-to-many connection between devices. So you can, when you go into CloudDB, there are a couple of different blocks. But if you get a value or store a value, you are automatically subscribed to changes in that value. And so you can have multiple apps or the same app on multiple clients all writing data to those variables, and then that information gets propagated to all the other clients. And so actually one example we did of this, I don't have the AIA on me, unfortunately, to show it to you, but we built a Pictionary app where you could have people draw, one person would draw, and in real time, all of the updates would be sent to the second device, and so they would see the drawing coming in, and you'd get to guess what the person was trying to draw. And so it gives you a lot of opportunities for kind of teaching students about how do you communicate between a lot of different devices within the environment. And right now, actually, I think one of our power users is trying to work to integrate it with a lot of IoT functionality, which is another thing that we can talk about. So essentially, you can have a bunch of sensors, which would be sending data to CloudDB, and then you could get updates streamed right to your phone.
Wow.
Which would be pretty cool.
That sounds great. We have another question from Omar. He says, I have another, App Inventor has many features that sometimes are overwhelming for little kids. For instance, I am thinking about Scratch Junior for little kids. Are you planning in the future to develop a small version for little kids for this target group?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that we have a master student working with us right now, Linda Tang. She is developing a function called selective subsets. And so it's not quite in that vein, but the idea is that you can actually present in the project a subset of the functionality of App Inventor, in which case, rather than being inundated with 80 different components to use, you can actually, as a teacher, restrict the functionality of App Inventor to only show, maybe 10 components or 5 components. And you can also restrict the blocks as well, so you can show a subset of a component's blocks. So rather than having to give them the whole suite of functionality all at once, which can be a bit overwhelming, instead you kind of incrementally expose them to new functionality over time, and so they can start smaller and grow in terms of what they know and what they're capable of. And so she's testing that as part of her master's thesis right now, and then we're going to need to do some work to understand kind of what is appropriate for kind of scaling this out. But that will be a feature that we hope to see in App Inventor, and then we're working on a set of tools to help make it easy to select that out and provide that as functionality for teachers to use.
That sounds great. So we're just about at the end of our hour. I think we have a few minutes left. So I want to give last call for questions for Evan. And then we can thank him. So I think one of the takeaways from this discussion is you are only seeing in the course as I'm sure you've discovered, a 2015 version of the platform. And one of the other features I'll just mention that's been added since this course was created was the scalable widgets in the designer. In terms of so some of the widgets have additional properties to what we're using in the course. But are there any last questions for Evan before we let him go?
Yeah, I will do my one more demo, okay. Which is the reason why I ran out. So, but this is a neat thing. So this is an iPad running our iOS companion, and you can do split screen. So on the right-hand side is the companion app running Hello Purr, and then on the left-hand side is Chrome, which is running my copy of App Inventor, and I've connected them together. So now I've got a single device that's running both App Inventor and the companion app, and then if the demo gods shine upon me, I can. Yeah, there we go. So,
that's really cool, and the that's all drag and drop now, right?
It will be. The current version that's production is not, but Jeff merged that change a couple weeks ago. So in the next release of App Inventor, you will be able to drag and drop on a touch screen device. And actually, a lot of that work was done by one of Ralph's students, Grace, who took the initiative to implement the original version, and I touched up some of the functionality to make it work well, and that will be available to everybody, hopefully pretty soon.
You'll be so happy to hear that. Here's a quick question. Would App Inventor be able to store in Azure or AWS?
I guess part of what, I guess, what do you mean by store exactly? So as an example, CloudDB is based on a open source project called Redis, and Redis can be run on any virtual machine or server. So you could spin up a CloudDB service in Azure or AWS. In fact, I believe we have 2 CloudDB instances. One runs out of MIT, but then as part of a long-term, not long-term, but a grant we have with EduHK in Hong Kong, we actually run a copy of CloudDB in Singapore in Amazon Web Services. So you can, run these services other places. That's one of the, we think one of the benefits of not tying it to something as proprietary as Firebase is that, it gives you more flexibility as a user.
Well, Evan, I want to thank you for being our guest this week. That was really exciting to see some of these new features that are coming. And I have to say, as someone who uses these App Inventor in a course, I think the way you've implemented the iOS is really terrific. It means that teachers and curriculum developers don't have to change any of their lessons very much in order to now extend the course to iOS users. So that's really great.
Yes, and actually we have a website. Maybe you've already mentioned this to your class, but we have does App Inventor run on iOS.com, which gives a breakdown of where we are in terms of the functionality that's been implemented and what functionality remains to be implemented. And so it's a way for the community to track our progress, and we try to keep that updated roughly weekly as we continue to implement functionality. So, slowly.
Actually, what I'll do is I'll put the link to that in the chat, so folks can go visit there and follow the progress that they're making in its development. Anyway, Evan, thank you. Thank you to our participants for joining us. I'm going to now stop the broadcast, and we'll see you all next week. Remember, next week we have another guest from MIT. It'll be Helen Lang. We'll talk about the MIT Master Trainer Program. So thanks, Evan.
Yeah, thanks, Ralph.
Really appreciate it.
Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.